For my presentation, I will be talking about Pitcher, Oklahoma. Pitcher, Oklahoma is a former mining boomtown turned ghost town on the border of Oklahoma and Kansas. Overmining and greed caused one of America's greatest, yet unknown, environmental disasters. For this project, I chose Heartland by Willie Nelson. Released in 1993, Heartland is from his album Across the Borderline. I chose this song for two reasons. First, I've always enjoyed Willie Nelson and his free-spirited attitude. And second, as a native Oklahoman, the heartland of America has always been very special to me. For this project, I've chosen to key in on two verses. There is a well where the water's so bitter nobody can drink. My American dream fell apart at the seams. These two verses hit the nail on the head when describing the environmental catastrophe that occurred in Pitcher and the surrounding area. First, I'm going to begin by talking about a little bit of the history of Pitcher. Pitcher was first founded in 1913 after lead and zinc ore was found around Harry Crawfish's allotment. The town was named after O.S. Pitcher, founder of the Pitcher Lead Company. Pitcher helped to produce bullets for World War I and World War II, with more than 50% of the lead and zinc consumed in World War I coming from the Pitcher field. At one time, the population was greater than 14,000 people. It produced more than $20 billion in ore between 1917 and 1947. The picture on the left shows what's called chat. That's that mound, those tall mounds in the background are chat, which are waste fragments of limestone and other rock produced from lead and zinc mining. It contains trace amount of lead and, as seen in the case of Pitcher, can be very toxic to humans. The Tar Creek Superfund site is often called the greatest environmental disaster that you've never heard of. Pollution first came to the attention of state and federal agencies in 1979 when they noticed toxic mining runoff staining the Tar Creek red. In 1980, the governor of Oklahoma created the Tar Creek Task Force. The task force comprised of several state and federal agencies tasked with investigating effects of mining drainage on the Tar Creek. In 1983, the EPA officially listed the Tar Creek area as a Superfund site. In 1984, the cleanup work began. The EPA began plugging mine shafts in an effort to protect the Rubidoux aquifer, and additionally, they began keeping an eye on the aquifer's health. During the 1990s, cleanup crews would remove 6 to 10 inches from residential yards to try and limit residents of Pitcher's exposure to toxic dust. These efforts ultimately proved too little and too late for the residents of Pitcher. Sadly for the residents of Pitcher, Willie Nelson's line, "There's a well where the water's so bitter nobody can drink," came true. Water from Tar Creek became undrinkable. Extreme adverse health effects plagued the people of Pitcher from the 1940s throughout the 2000s until the town eventually became a ghost town. These adverse effects included but weren't limited to lead poisoning, high lung cancer rates, and high infant mortality rates. In 1994, Indian Health Services released a test results concerning the blood lead levels of Indian children living in the Tar Creek Superfund site. This test indicated that approximately 35% of the children had concentrations of lead in their blood exceeding 10 micrograms per deciliter. That's what the CDC considers to be a health concern. In 2004, the University of Kansas School of Medicine released a study. This study said that the rates of the chronic lung disease pneumoconiosis were 2,000% higher than the rest of the country. Pitcher became unlivable. Residents were affected indiscriminately. The children, the adults, and the elderly all suffered. School teachers in Pitcher noted that their students were often more sick than other students from other areas, and that their test results lagged behind the rest of the state. The chat piles that surround Pitcher in massive mounds contributed massively. Children would climb them, families would picnic on them, they were rifle ranges and cross-country running training grounds. The chat piles were a cultural staple in Pitcher, but the residents had no clue that they were contributing to their health effects. Pictured, you see the Tar Creek polluted red from mineshaft runoff. Finally, for the residents of Pitcher still remaining, the American dream fell apart at the seams. Greed finished off the town of Pitcher. Overmining led to the collapse of mines. In the mines under Pitcher are what's called pillars. Pillars are the part of the mine shaft left untouched to hold up the roof of the mine, sometimes 100 feet above the floor. In the 1970s, miners began mining the pillars too, to squeeze every last dollar out of the town. In 2006, the Army Corps of Engineers released a study that found 9/10 of the buildings in Pitcher were susceptible to sudden collapse because the mines under them were so unstable. The study, combined with a 2008 tornado that killed 7 and injured 150 people, ultimately closed the town. The federal government began offering buyouts for the residents of Pitcher to leave for their own safety. On September 1st, 2009, the city government of Pitcher voted to cease the municipality and unincorporate the town. Earlier in 2009, after 90 years, the class of 2009 was the last to graduate from Pitcher High School, unable to return to their hometown and unable to stay. For the 4% of the Native American population, this represented another forced removal. They had no real choice. They could stay and plausibly die a painful death, or take the meager government settlement and leave. Lack of regulation, greed, and a failure to act on the environmental catastrophe all doomed the town of Pitcher and its residents. A Tulsa-based appraisal firm intentionally undervalued properties. In 2015, 161 people sued and received $4,000 each in the settlement. That's $1,700 less than they expected even then. They have no real legal recourse. The town of Pitcher was closed. Generations of families that had lived there were forced to leave, only to be able to never return again. Pitcher represents the problem in environmental law. The problem is the trade-off between money and protection, protecting the environment or increasing corporate profits. Time and time again, as we see in environmental law, corporate profits were favored over people. That resulted in a town that was once a booming mining town to become nothing. A town where no one lives, a town where no one can live, and a town where the EPA has said it's very possible that no one will be able to live again. Pitcher is a town where the American dream fell apart at the seams and the United States government failed to act. For me, a buyout, a meager buyout, is a slap in the face for leaving behind generations of happy memories. Thank you.